Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. And today, I've got with me Mark. Right now, as usual, we don't go into a big bio on Mark because it'll come out all in the conversation and it's like a big reveal. So Mark, hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us today.
Morning, Joe. Good to see you.
Brilliant. So let's get straight into it then. We've had a few great conversations and we met on LinkedIn, which is something we'll come on to later on. Now, it's about discovering about you as a person. So before you joined the military, way before you joined the military, what were you up to? What did you get down to, and what prompted you to join the military?
I had to spend a bit of time thinking about this last night, Joe, to remember exactly where this came from. So when I joined the military back in 1999 as a young 18-year-old, my aspiration was to become a stuntman. I had no long-term military service background. I had no family connections to the military beforehand. I was literally flicking through the UCAS handbook, wondering how one goes about becoming a stuntman. I had absolutely no idea, no mentoring or coaching to move into an industry like that. And I saw an advert for a gap year commission to go away and spend a year being an officer, being an army officer. And I thought that could be some good in the CV. That would look good in the CV. It'd be a great little kind of intro to military life. You'd learn a bit of the environment, a bit of the people, get into the culture. And all good stuff from a aspiring actor who wanted to go away and do stunt work for a living.
Right, so the typical army brochure, coloured photos, sucked you in. You got sucked in by the brochure.
Completely sucked in with absolutely no idea of how a stunt career would ever go, with no idea of how any of that actually worked. It seemed like it would work as a logical kind of stepstone to something else. But I had a university degree that was it was an arts degree, so no background, no politics and economics, no military history, absolutely no connections to the military whatsoever. I was a complete outsider to military life when I first turned up at the Princess of Wales's regiment, having had 3 weeks at Sandhurst, which is as long as you get for this gap year commission course. You the bare basics of holding a rifle, cleaning a uniform, turning up looking vaguely presentable. It is an absolute crash course in military life. And then you're expected to turn up and be an army officer. In my case, phenomenally fortunate to join the great and the bold Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment down in Tidworth at the time, as they were, and spend a year being an army officer. And you are absolutely thrown in the deep end. So 3 weeks is not even nearly close enough to have any idea of what you're doing as an army officer. So I proceeded to walk around the place, bumping into things, banging into stuff, making every mistake going. So future questions about mistakes and failures and learning from them. It's a great way of doing that. It's going to throw yourself in the deep end and see how you swim.
That's fabulous. That, because I know that I went to Sandhurst for different reasons, because I went there working on the assault courses and stuff. So 3 weeks, that's amazing, because I know that the full Sandhurst officer training course, even when you popped out the other end, then you come for the engineers. For officers that get allocated engineers, then you come and do the young officers course, which we used to support all the time. We had a great laugh, actually. So only 3 weeks, and then you've got your commission, Queen's Commission, as it was then, King's Commission now.
Yep. A short service commission, very bounded.
Yeah. And basically, you can just about sign a leave check, can't you, at that point?
But probably not even that. I think this is 4 days of JPA as well. So those sort of things you learn on the job. There's a lot learning on the fly, Joe. A great education and learning, and an intro into not being fully prepared for what it is you're going into, and learning as you go, relying on those around you to help, to give you some kind of guidance and advice, finding your own way, learning from your mistakes. Some really good lessons in making, because the only way you could learn at that stage, having had 3 weeks of training, was to learn through making mistakes, and then picking yourself up from those mistakes and making good of it.
Thank you for that. And you did mention the great and the good. So at the Prince of Wales. So how much support did you get, and how much prejudice was there or not? You only being a 3-week commissioned gap year officer.
I think certainly. I mean, this is the first of my commissions. Obviously, I joined full time afterwards. I came out, and this is the sort of a formative, changing moment. Was this short service commission? I got a lot of help from some very good people, fellow officers, in the most part, who tried to kind of guide and steer me into what the right way to do things. So these are all guys who've done the full year's course at Sandhurst, done their young officers. It's an infantry course, so it would have been PCBC afterwards. They've had a year and a half, almost 2 years or so, to get used to this life.
Yeah.
Providing whatever guidance and steering. And there are some of the people I was with in the Gap Year Commission are still very much there today. I've seen James Martin's face recently. James was a fairly senior captain in the Princess of Wales when I was there. I've recently seen him now appear as one of the people responsible for the extraction out of Kabul as a brigadier. So these people are still going today, and these people very much shaped me as a young officer with absolutely no idea what I was doing after 3 weeks of training. These are guys who really kind of helped me out and pushed me through and kept me on the straight and narrow as best they could, whilst also having fun with it as well. I came out of this experience a year in an infantry regiment with 3 weeks training, loads of mistakes under my belt, loads of learning opportunities as a changed man. The idea of going and being a stuntman now is completely gone. That had completely wirewalled its way out of my thought process, and all I wanted to do was I wanted 6 weeks off, start university, and then as soon as I turned up at university, I realised I just want to go back to being in the army. I want to do this right this time. Actually, go through the full course, learn how this works. The best people I'd met were the guys I've been working with for the last year in the PWRR. So that more or less sold me up to becoming a full-time member. So I then left university, went straight to Sandhurst, did the full course, joined the Royal Artillery. As you say, went through the young officers course afterwards, so the full year at Sandhurst, and then about 6 months or so learning how to actually ply my trade as an artillery officer.
That's fantastic. And so Hollywood wouldn't like people who aspire to be stuntmen to go on the gap year officers course, really, because they'd have no stuntmen then. And I'm so pleased. Go on.
Phenomenal experience, but they'd lose more people, I think, than they keep.
Brilliant. Well, so okay, so you've touched on your military career or the transition from Civvy Street to military. Tell me a bit about your military career. What did you get up to, please, Mark?
So again, I was very lucky, Joe. I more or less let the winds take me where they would. I can't genuinely say I had some sort of structured plan as to where things were going. So I joined Sandhurst, wanted to be an infantry officer. And this was around about the 2002, 2003. So the infantry were made about a third of the size and about twice as busy in the same moment by the government of the day. So we lost some infantry places, and I had to go back and halfway through Sandhurst change my entire career plan and try and pitch for an alternative to the infantry, because the places had been stripped back massively. So I had to go very much cap in hand to our Royal Artillery representative at Sandhurst, a great guy, a great man, who was willing to go and take me into the fold as an artillery officer. And then from there, joined young officers 6 months, and then proceeded to work my way through a really interesting and I think very pertinent career for today's world in drones. So the Royal Artillery are responsible for some of the surveillance assets that the army uses, and again, this day and age, you hear the word drone, every couple of sentences, and it's a very common thing now for the world. You can get out of Maplins and buy your own. Back in the sort of early 2000s, this was a still very new, very limited understanding capability. that was being flown and operated, not as we recognise it today, not in any way, shape, or form as aerospace would recognise it. It's done in this day and age. A great formative experience to have at the time, being on this sort of sharp end of unmanned air system use in a military context, which in today's world is phenomenally useful experience. And I was lucky enough to be right on the sharp end of a lot of the new capabilities that were coming in, but more importantly, new ways of doing things. So, there is no bad experience. Every gunner officer wants to join Joe to become, to be the gun guy, to be the close support. You always want to be the person near the guns, because that's what you join the artillery force. If I've got 5 guns, I will say from my experience that you go through the training process to start that, and everyone sort of believes that if you don't get your first job, if you don't get the job you wanted, that in some way, shape, or form, that's your first experience of failure. There is no bad experience that you can have in the military. The only bad experience is the one you don't learn from. And whilst I wouldn't have known it at the time, and I think as there's pervasive disappointment of not being being a gunner and yet not going guns. Actually, the best thing I could ever have done was join a relatively small and niche capability area like unmanned air systems by drones. Because let's face it, in this day and age, it couldn't have set me up better for success in my current role in aviation.
That's fantastic. I picked up on a few things there as well. So what interests me is that you had no structured plan. Although, having said it, because the one thing I found from my military career is that the powers that be have an overall global picture of what's going on and where they need to send people. Like, for instance, I qualified as a plumber in the engineers. So we didn't get posted as a regiment. We got posted as an individual. So if there was a plumber needed in Cyprus, you'd be fortunate if you got it. But I mean, they'd look at how many plumbers were in one unit. Well, we only need 2. We've got 3. So we'll send Joe Bloggs off there. So the fact is, though, your structured plan was to get great success, and I know people use the term regularly, lucky, and I think about luck in the way that labour under correct knowledge, right? So labour under correct knowledge, because I believe that you've got to be focused on success. Now you might not know what that success transpires into, because they might just say, right, we need you lot over there, you're off. You're getting on a 4-tonner and you're getting on a plane, perk, whatever, and you're gone. The thing is, though, you make do, because you said there's no bad experience except the one you don't learn from, which is brilliant, because the only bad question is the one you didn't ask. So there's lots. So it's really great. I can tell you've got a real success-driven attitude, which is good. So what happened next? You're in the drones. What does that mean? What do you do? And what challenge did you face?
I mean, I think this is a really useful segue, and I love the translation of luck into something that's more knowledge and skills based there, Joe. We're talking in the military about making your own luck, and we'll talk about we talk about failure. This is going to come up a lot. I think we in the British Army find ourselves, British military in general, but the British Army in particular, and certainly in the operational deployments that I've had, we do find ourselves quite often, feeling that kind of the touch of hand, the hand of God touching our shoulder slightly and saying, well, that was really lucky. We do to a degree make our own luck, and now I work in risk management, across a much broader and wider field than just aviation and drones and everything else. My experience in risk management shows me that actually there is such a thing as luck, but it is something we do have some degree of craft over, and it all comes from the right skill sets, the right kind of mindset, values, the right genetic level, the good bone structure, and DNA level setup that we can get to set up for success. That is what's making our own luck. Now there is the dice roll. There's always a chance, but I think certainly that's true of the next stages of my career where I was lucky enough, again lucky, someone's plan perhaps, or just the fate, the way that things were going at the time, to work with all these new abilities coming in, all in the unmanned aviation space, that were all being developed and written on the fly on operations. I had a tour history way outside of normal Harmony guidelines. I was deployed pretty much every 6 months, for 6 months between 2006 and 2010, because these, what I was involved in, the capabilities I got myself involved in, these drone capabilities were in massively high demand in both Iraq and Afghanistan at the time. So, the regiments that I worked with and the capabilities I worked with, these guys and girls were getting bounced out to theatre pretty much every 6 months or so, on a constant rotation, very high demand and very high pressure assets that they wanted to see. And I was lucky enough to be along for the ride. I said lucky at the time. I was probably getting quite cooked. I was melting myself. You can only spend so much time bouncing back and forth between the UK and Iraq, and UK and Afghanistan, or in some cases Iraq to Afghanistan without a stopover in between. You can only do that so often without getting quite tired. So come 2010, I asked my desk officer for a bit of a break, a bit of a pause. That was my fourth tour, by which time I'd moved into what we'd more traditionally call a gallery roll, joint fires, and running around 9-foot high corn in some very dark places in the world. Doing the infantry thing, which again, best job I ever had, without any doubt. But thankfully, everyone came back with everything attached.
Oh, that's
so
good.
Lucky, touch wood. And I asked for a break. So I then had 2 years or so working with a capability development role based in the UK, quite quiet, quite passive. And at 2012, that's when the government of the day decided to, hesitate to use the word cull, but it did certainly feel like that at the time. I think the way it felt was probably quite relevant. Cull the army down to about 2/3 its size once again. So we went from 120 or so to just over over 80,000. And I was one of several thousand men and women around the British Army, certainly, who found themselves on the chopping block as forgive the phrase, but surplus to requirements, which is quite a hard feeling to receive after having spent the best part of 5-6 years or so back and forth on operations. So then found that actually, sorry, there's no more job for you. The government of the day, financial crisis, we've had to cut back, we had to let some places go. So
and let me just dig a little deeper there, please, Mark, because I get it, and I know how we do it in military. You just gloss over stuff. It's just a bit of a conversation, and you just, I did this. And underneath that, I know there's loads of stuff going on, because stuff happens, right? Shit happens, right? As we know. So how did that make you feel at the time? I mean, you've given your life, you've been bounced around in and out of operations, watching your men and women under your command and being under immense stress, strain, and workload. And then all of a sudden, poof, you popped out the other end. And to put it into context, because I looked at the history of the military, the Royal Engineers alone, after the Second World War, just in the Corps of Royal Engineers, there were 250,000 of us. 250,000 sappers, right? Now you're talking about cull, because the cull happened, the SDR, when was that? In 1990, just before Iraq won. What a great time.
First defense views.
And I got out in 88, so I missed what my mates got when they got the SDR payoff. But I mean, they always seem to do it at interesting times, because and if you're an accountant and you're listening, not against you, but the fact is that military accountants, they just look at budgets, don't they? And they don't look at morale and workloads.
And that's to your point, Joe. It's a good question to ask. How do you feel about this? You do. It is very easy to get into quite a bitter mindset, exactly. But you're leaving a family, and it is a family at that stage. A job that you love, a job that you're proud of, a job that makes you feel proud of yourself. Importantly, for reasons that are not your fault, that are not something that you've done, or something you've not done, a mistake that you've made, nothing to do with that. It is someone else's mistake, way off somewhere else, in the industry, in the economy, has dropped the ball, and all of a sudden now the men and women around me and myself and others, we're all paying for it. It could be very easy to allow yourself to get bitter, and as you say, being military types, we often quite just shrug our shoulders and suck it up, fine, get on with it, move on. don't knock that. It is the lesson that I took away from that experience was that being in the military and being in the military family is a lot more and a lot broader, a lot more long-standing and pervasive than just putting on a uniform in the morning and walking in through the guardhouse.
Hey, do you enjoy sipping a good glass of wine? As you know, sipping too much wine can leave you feeling groggy in the mornings. For less than the price of a good bottle of wine, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joelteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
What you come away with, what the military gives you, is a set of relationships, a network, and crucially, although we don't realize at the time, a set of values. A way of working, and values is a very trite term these days. Every company has its value statement. Every company has values. I hate to say it, but from my experience, having been a consultant now in business for about 8 years, you can always spot the companies that have trotted out a value statement because they think it looks good. You look at the behavior of the organization, particularly leadership, and if you see them behaving in a way that is completely divergent to the way their values indicate they would or should behave and make decisions, then those values aren't worth the paper they're written on.
No.
But the values that you have from the military, again, it doesn't matter, RAF, Navy, Air Force, we're all pretty similar. The British Army, discipline, courage, loyalty, integrity, selfless commitment, respect for others. I can still reel these out today, the big six. And I can reel them out today, not because I've learned them by rote, but because they matter to me, because they are the values that I decided on my way out the door in the military in 2012, I wanted to apply to my daily life, and run all my decision-making processes through to guide my behavior. And in a sense, that gave me some continuity outside of the military to say, that is what makes me a serviceman. Irrespective of whether I'm putting on a uniform, the maintenance of those values is what I was proud of in the military, and I will keep those values and maintain them. I now look for, I put all my decision making through those same values. So I look for companies that demonstrate those same values that I can join and work with and feel proud of, because they are similar to me. They are my values, adopted from my experience in the military, but they are now mine. I take them with me wherever I go. I judge 2012 was an interesting one. I think as a young officer, I was probably quite easygoing with politics at the time. I took no interest in political decision making. But let's face it, being in the military, we are one of these very odd organizations where, in a very high level way, we are able to vote for and decide upon who our shareholders and our stakeholders are. We get every 4 or 5 years, we get to vote on who the people who are going to guide our organization are. The political masters that we serve have got incredible power to send us places, not tell us what to do when we get there. That's down to us, but they do get to decide where we go to and what equipment we have when we get there. And what I learned through the 2012 experience was to take more of an interest in how my country is governed, that I have served. I'm quite happy to go and travel to far-flung parts of the world in service of our great country. And apparently I wasn't willing to go and walk 50 minutes up the road there to go and put a piece of paper in a box or go and send a postal vote in. So all of a sudden now, I now have a reason to go and take an interest in how my country's governed and how it's worked. And I apply exactly the same rules, Joe. I decide upon who and what party I wish to vote for based on the values. And I will choose the political party and the political personality that I vote for based on integrity, courage, loyalty, discipline, self-respect, selfless commitment, and respect for others. And those values help give some consistency to your time outside of the military, to your time out and away, because you are still feeling like you are part of that group and you are taking away the best of what military service has. Combined with the network, your network of people that you make, the friends you make, they're all going to be living those same kind of values. So you maintain that family and that professional network through those values, inside or outside the military.
Thank you so much. And I heard the statement as well bandied around. And going back to your mission statement or vision statement or value statement, it is right.
Yeah.
I know of people who work for companies, they don't even know what the mission statement is, and if they do, they've learnt it, but parrot fashion, verbatim. They don't understand what it means, and when someone comes up with it, who knows what it is? But you're right. In the military, our values do definitely come through. And I remember you talking about political parties back in the Thatcher years when I was. We were all. There were a few regiments. First of all, we just thought it was our squadron. Turned up at Colchester. This was way before Airborne went to Colchester. Airborne was still all just shot, and then more and more 4-tonners kept coming during the day. Then we stayed there overnight, and then all of a sudden we'd all stand to about 12 midnight. And we're all moving out. I was in the first 4-tonner, and I looked back, and as far as I could see, there were just 4-tonner lights, miles, like all engineering regiment. And we're driving, and we stop all of a sudden. There's a Robin Reliant across the road, stopping us from progressing. So the officer our troop commander gets out, has a word with him, and he says, "I'm not going anywhere. You can't come through here." So we just got a 10X up, a big forklift truck. And he just sped off. When we got there, it then transpired what we were doing. We were going to an American base, and it may or may not have had nuclear weapons in there. Our job was to put a Type 8 barbed wire fence, double, so 2 Danik cores plus 1 on top with 6-foot pickets by hand with monkeys. For I think the perimeter was over 10 miles. Like we had to put it in by hand all the way around, and that's why all the regiments were there, because each of us had a segment. We had 800 meters, I think, that we had to do. That was my squadron's job. But in the morning, just at dusk, as we were manhandling some protesters, a Gazelle helicopter came in, and Michael Heseltine jumped out, and it was at the time when there were pay disputes going similar to today. And my mate just went, as he jumped out, said, morning. He said, "Where's our pay rise?" And then we all started looking away. Because, we can't do anything about pay rise. But he said that. And as soon as he said that, Michael Heseltine said, Tarzan, as he was on, "Well done, chaps." Turned around, straight back in the Gazelle. Off he went.
Straight on the helicopter, yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? We, some of the best people we're ever going to meet, men and women in the services, this podcast particularly relevant to it, and yet we often feel like we're being led, the old lines, led by donkey story comes up to it. I have a newfound sympathy and respect for people, civil servants and politicians in very difficult leadership positions now, having grown up a bit and worked in the industry and worked with some of these people. And I did some work in the 2012 Olympics. I worked with some of the characters in the Home Office who were trying to make that a success and making sure it was a safe, successful games. I have a newfound sympathy, and you will find this as well. It's very easy to look at people who are very different to you, and lack sympathy and lack understanding of their perspective. And again, I'd point to the values as the way of finding some common ground there. We are, most of us listening to this podcast are never going to be involved in politics, and many of us are very happy about that, myself included. Stay well away from that industry, not interested. But that can break down some of the empathy, the understanding of who those people are, because they're all humans. And in the end of the day, they're all people. They've all got their own drivers. They've got their own mission statements, their own intents, their own mindsets, their own values that they put things through. The key to understanding and the key to finding that kind of middle ground is to see where those values meet up and match. And when it comes to politicians, we get to choose them. So if we get bad ones, kind of got to turn the knife on ourselves a little bit. Also, and one day, is this our fault? If we don't like the people in charge, well, we to be able to go and choose these people. Responsibility and women, because we are willing to serve our country, to defend our country, to defend a lifestyle and ideal, we should be willing to go and walk 5 minutes up the road to go and put a piece of paper in a box. And if we're not, are we taking our duty as a citizen of the country, but also as a service person? Are we taking that seriously?
And yes, thank you. And that's a great point, actually. If it's not good just whinging, because isn't it interesting?
We don't do that. That's not what the military do.
No,
we don't do that. We don't whinge. We get on with stuff.
No, but I'm talking about population generally. Like, it's interesting that a lot of people complain, but the fact is that you never get 100% turnout voting, right? And they are the people that are going to send us off into the Ulu or whatever.
Yep.
You know, so it is, be careful what you wish for, certainly. So you touched on it, and I just want to explore it a little bit deeper. When you left the military, right, there would have been a sense of loss, because you've already said that. What problems did you have? Right, you've handed your bedding in, you've handed your kit in, Queen's Commission, everything. You step out through the big wrought iron gates, metaphorically speaking. They close behind you. What are you doing?
So the challenges are a really good one. The first thing is money, understanding how money works. Not something I think most of us are particularly good at in the military. First off, straight out the gate, we live it's important to recognize how odd our military life is when it comes to what our civilian counterparts, the life we're now going to take on, have to deal with in terms of day-to-day finances, business, and running things. A lot of that's taken care for us in the military to different degrees, and it's kind of up to us to decide how much we want to go and dabble in understanding of finances and managing your day-to-day money. And yet, of course, all of a sudden out the gate, you now have to do that. The Career Transition Partnership does a good job, I think, of trying to set people up for success when it comes to their job or their next career. I think maybe there is a bit of a blind spot in some cases with helping people get on with some of the more domestic day-to-day stuff that they haven't had to deal with. And this is very variable depending on which career transition partnership you're part of on your way out the door. Some are brilliant at this. I went to the one in Tidworth, and the team at Tidworth were absolutely phenomenal. They did cover this in very detailed terms, and there was some very good advice they were giving to soldiers, sailors, and airmen to manage this. But yeah, I think it's probably one of those areas that people aren't quite ready for until they move out. In terms of how to manage that, the network, and I'm sure you talked about it on the podcast, and it's worth reinforcing here as well. Every job, the best jobs that I've had since I left the military, and this ridiculous career path that I've been on that's landed me to this point working as a risk manager in aerospace, someone whose experience of aviation up until this point has been unmanned air systems, therefore obviously not being in to be working as I do now in aerospace as a risk manager, and working in an industry I have no right or background necessarily to be involved in, except for by capability and skill and knowing certain things and understanding and learning how things go. They've all been. I have always been introduced to those jobs by friends and by the network, and I can name them for you. The people who set me up for success and got me from A to B to C to D to E to F to where I am now. It has all been about the network and about people helping their fellow service men and women to the next rung of the ladder and asking questions. So assets like LinkedIn was quite a new thing when I started out my journey. It is a well-established resource now, and it's well worth exploring. It's well worth sweating as much as you can do. Build a network, get to know people. Before you even touch Facebook on your way out, on the way out of the military, the last year for your military, stop using Facebook and start using LinkedIn, and use that as your social media platform, because that network you build will be phenomenally useful to getting you into jobs that you never imagined you'd even want, or never mind be good at and succeed at. And you'd be amazed where that network will take you and how many growth opportunities you will get. Guaranteed, you probably won't get the job that you thought you were going to get on the way out the door. You will use some of the skills and lessons and courses that you've done in your career transition partnership. Others you won't go near again. I thoroughly recommend to anyone who's interested in this, APMP, the Associate for Project Management Professionals. Project management is a phenomenally useful course in general. A good industry course to have under your belt, but I haven't used it. They're not formally, not in any kind of formal way. I've done project management, but not through a more structured APMP course. But that learning in itself and having that course under your belt was absolute gold dust to put some structure to how you do things. So some of these courses you will use, some of them you won't. To a degree, let the network take you to places and opportunities. And that Jim Carrey film, Yes Man, say yes to everything.
Yeah.
In those opening few years, say yes to absolutely everything. There should be no opportunity you don't say yes to when the door is open to you, because eyes wide open. You're into a new industry here, new world. It's phenomenally exciting, and one of the military skills we have, which we don't ever put in our CV, is an inoculation to shock and horror. To surprise, to ambush. Our military training gives us an inoculation to changing conditions, rapidly changing conditions. And again, you don't put that in your CV, but this is your transition from military to civil is ultimately a change program, and it will come with a degree of shock and surprise that needs to be managed. But it's also an opportunity. Change is an opportunity for growth, and it should be treated as such and seized in that light. But the network that you have around you, the people who have made those transitions, who are going through it with you, who follow after you, they are the resource that will get you through this, and use that.
That's brilliant. Fantastic. So, yes, that's a very good point about inoculation to shock and horror, because it always interests me when I see CVs and they say, works well as a team and as an individual and can work under pressure. And I'm thinking, where have you copy and pasted that from? And how true is it? That's not to say that if it's someone who's aspiring to do that, then that's great. They should say that, though, on the CV, rather than say it in such confidence that you think, right, okay, these can deal with anything. Whereas in the military, I just think those guys can, if that makes sense.
Well, look at the example you gave a minute ago there, Joe. Crashing out an entire regiment of several regiments to go and do a late night, putting barbed wire up to go and secure a compound that has to be secured in 48 hours or less. But put into perspective the success, the achievement that entire enterprise came with. When you consider these days, it would take civil industry about 6-8 weeks to spin up the kind of infrastructure and manpower necessary to go and produce something like that. We can do it in 48 hours. Talk about inoculation to change. Being ready and agility. There are some common buzzwords out there these days, and I'm sure other people who've talked to you about this. The translation of your skills into civilian speak. There's a lot of this, and the Career Transition Partnership will talk about this as well when you go through it. Translating your military experience into civilian speak. I think it's worth mentioning that someone told me this the other day, which is a really interesting take on HR. These days, HR departments are looking less for experience and more for skills. So, HR companies these days are not looking for people to say, you've had 3 years experience in this industry or that industry. They're looking for comparative skills that your experience may have given you, but there are other ways to gain skills than just experience. Now, that's great for us in the ex-military types, servicemen and women who are coming out now. I certainly felt this on my CV, looking at my CV and saying, I don't have civilian experience. I don't have experience I can put into my CV that is going to stand up to my civilian counterparts who've had 5, 6, 8, 10 years in this industry already and are already 10 years down the road ahead of me. The world has changed in our favor in this way, because we are now looking at skill sets, demonstrable skill sets as the entry point into a job. Can you do this job? Can you survive in this industry? And in that sense, we have learned through our military experience some phenomenal skills, which you won't even appreciate. Resilience to change, and resilience is a big buzzword in the industry these days. It's not very well understood. What is resilience? In simple terms, resilience and robustness, characteristics that service leaders have in spades. The ability to take a hit, and the ability to stand back up again afterwards. Resilience and robustness. These are organizational terms, but they work at the individual level as well. We are resilient people. We can stand up. We can keep going. We keep moving where other people would give way. One of the common questions I'm sure you'll be asking: how do you deal with failure? And I guarantee other people on this podcast will have said the same thing. Learn from experience. But a phrase I heard the other day that I really liked was, when you fail small, fail fast. Don't lick your wounds. Don't spend ages mulling over your failures and halting progress, the learning experience that others will have talked about. Learning from failure, learning from mistakes.
Do you like coffee? A lot of people tend to spend money on expensive coffees from outlets without even thinking about it. Well, for the price of just 2 coffees per month, you can gain access to valuable business and life resources gained from my over 37 years in business and 15 years in the military. These world-class resources are designed to help you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations you deserve. So visit joeteams.com now to find out more. That's JOETEAMS.com to find out more.
Don't spend ages doing that by licking your wounds and wondering how it's perceived and worrying about perception. We don't do this in the military, but it's a great characteristic. We fail quick, we fail fast. Make a mistake, pick yourself back up and go. And the quicker you can do that, we talk about the OODA loop in the military, but the faster you can get back on the horse again and start going, having learned from mistakes and made a change, then the smaller that failure, that mistake will ultimately have in terms of an impact. Again, how do you write that up?
And that's great, because that's just reminded me of something. We used to have phallic symbol of the week. It was called something else, actually. You see, in the military, right, a problem isn't a problem like a problem shared is a problem hard, but it was a problem aced or whatever, because it just went around the whole unit, and then it'd be squadron bar. You just have a laugh about it, and it'd be effectively what it would be was, what did you learn from that? They didn't necessarily say that, but that's what it was about, and a bit of ridicule in a nice, friendly way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that also causes a sign of robustness. That we don't mind a bit of hard criticism, bit of jibing from our colleagues, because we know it's not personal. It's not it's not designed to be something that's at you. It's making light of a failure. It's making light of a moment that everyone's had, and everyone has one. So everyone gets a turn. But in doing so, that makes us more resilient, more to. You can't put that on a CV, but that is part of you as a service leaver. As a serviceman or woman, you've been through the environment, you survived it, you've got through it, you've enjoyed it, you've grown from it. Back yourself a little bit. When you come to this big civilian industry we're talking about, it isn't as big and scary, and you'd be amazed how those skill sets are there in you that you may not recognize. One thing I would say that's worth mentioning, I think, at this stage is a word of caution, perhaps. And again, maybe other podcasts will talk about this as well. Being a service leaver, it's worth taking a second to recognize how you different by civilian compadres. And I've certainly picked up on this, and this is something that's been mentioned to me several times as well. Once your world, don't embrace the change, embrace the difference.
Sorry, bud, could you just say that again? We had a bit of problem with comms.
Yeah, sure. So when word of caution, having made a successful transition, which I have no doubt everyone who's listening to this podcast will make, having made that transition, embrace the change, embrace the new environment you're in, avoid, like the plague if you can, trying to turn the organization you're in or the way you behave in it into a small little island of military behavior. Part of making the transition is welcoming and accepting the new environment you're in. You are now working with a civilian audience, people who've not had the same background and experience as you. We love our history. We love, the dits, the war stories, pulling up sandbags and swinging lanterns and telling all these work, because they are experiences that very few people are ever going to have. But they can also make us quite isolated. They can turn us into a clique. They can make us quite individual and different from the people around us. If you're going to make a successful integration into a civilian organization, you've also got to recognize that those stories are not the stories of other people around you.
Yeah.
And we do see it a lot. company or organization that's got quite a few ex-military types in it, that hire and recruits, that actively looks for ex-military types, you can find a bit of a clique developing with, those ex-military types and then the non-ex-military types.
Yeah.
What you're actually doing there, of course, is making a little island, and that can be
Yeah.
quite toxic to an organization that's trying to pull together. You're actually building artificial barriers inside an organization through your ex-military experience. So do take a moment to be aware of the people around you who are not of your caliber, of not of your type, of not of your background and history. And remember that you're working for them now. You're not trying to make a little island of military behavior, ex-military behavior. You are joining a civilian organization to be a civilian. Embrace the change. Don't fight against it.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Mark, because you know as well as I do the one-liner, civvies, right? But the fact is that once you leave the military, you are a civvy, right? And that's just it. So, and guess what? And what I've found, right, because I've been out the military a little bit longer than you, and people are people, and they're all right. The fact is, we've all got different experiences. It's just that we bring a different ability to orchestrate problems, challenges, successes differently than maybe the civilian. But working together, we can make an organization so much more powerful.
It's a really good point. I mean, this word diversity is banging around at the moment in the civilian world, and again, it's getting itself a bad rap because of the way the media is presenting it, perhaps. A great person gave me a really interesting insight into diversity the other day. From a commercial point of view for a company, companies that are running around with with diversity spread across their banners and their LinkedIn profiles these days, what are they actually talking about when they say diversity? And they're not talking. It's not diversity. It's not so much diversity of people as diversity of perspectives, of ideas, of backgrounds. Because the more diverse your organization is, to use that buzzword, the more different kinds of people you have from different backgrounds, I think races, religions, types, genders, the more perspectives you have on the same thing. And again, this is one for us to be aware of as military types. We are beaten into a stock shape and size through our training, through our experience, through a bit of peer pressure and groupthink. Become quite what we think. So, when we talk about diversity, it's not, and you can always spot an organization that's doing diversity on a criteria basis for show, because they welcome in this diverse group of people and then don't listen to them when they come to ask their perspectives. The organizations that get this right and are commercially benefiting from embracing this word called diversity are the ones who get these different ideas and perspectives in and then listen to them. Well, let's be honest, we are the military. We are ex-military types. We are part of that diversity criteria. And whether we recognize it in ourselves or not, when we join the civilian world, we are the more unusual. We are a diverse perspective, a different angle on the same thing. Exactly as you say, we bring a different perspective, different view, different angle, different background, ethos, values. We are what part of that diversity criteria. So before we start thinking too differently about, diversity is this bad thing that's got a bad rap at the moment, and it's being associated with terms like woke. It's not about meeting criteria. It's about getting in new perspectives and angles on a problem.
And that's great. And while you were saying that, something popped up in my mind. I remember, because I always say to people, and I know I would mention the Royal Engineers again because I'm a sapper. But the thing is that infantry and artillery tend to come from geographical areas like the Kings, the Cheshires or Mercian Regiment. The engineers come from all around the country. So when we were calling in some, I don't know, mortar or something, mortar support, we developed an accent that we could all understand, because in the engineers we've got Irish, we've got Welsh, we've got Scottish, we've got Cockneys, we've got Geordies, we've got Commonwealth. So we had to be clear on communication. So if we're calling in support fire, we've got to be dead clear on our comms, and it'd be read back. So you got dead right. And I suppose that's just a snapshot of what diversity is. You've got to believe in it, and you've got to be clear on your comms, haven't you? Really.
It's understanding someone else's point of view. It's a great, comms is a great one, isn't it? It's this word empathy, again, it sounds like a very warm, fluffy word. The kind of word that my university course did doing a drama or media course would have embraced. You know, empathy is a phenomenally useful consultancy skill, and I guarantee, whether you realise it or not, every person in the military has exercised a huge amount of empathy. It's about walking a day in someone else's shoes, sitting through their eyes. You can't communicate with someone, you can't pass an instruction or an order across to anyone unless you understand their perspective. When we give our orders process, when junior NCOs will learn this, all the way up to and including brigadiers and generals, when we are giving our instructions and our orders to our soldiers, sailors, and airmen, you know, as an officer, as a leader, you can't lead if you can't pass that instruction, that order, that guidance across to them in a way that they understand, they translate, and they can use. Yeah. So I guarantee you, every leader, every person going through Sandhurst or Lympstone or Cranwell or anywhere else, has exercised empathy by being able to pass an idea from one person to another in order to help them understand, to see the world through their eyes and translate it. Again, you cannot put money on the value of that skill to empathize and then see the world in a more diverse way. Best job I ever had in without hands down was being a fire support team commander for the Gurkhas for 6 months in Afghan.
Oh, Gurkhas, you know, great.
They're just best men I've ever worked with, you know, the best regiment, because they are so phenomenally different from your average everyday British regiment, and the amount of learning and, you know, the entire experience was a gift, because it was something different.
And so it amuses me when people talk about having to be on a train for hours or in a car for hours. The Gurkhas, right? My experience of them, they get flown over to Nepal, and then they've got to walk 3 days to get home.
Yep, and that's their leave. And they would do it, and they are most incredible people.
14 days leave, and 6 of that's tabbing to see the
tabbing.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting about being a leader, officer, section commander, because you got to have lived in their boots and understand what you're sending them to. Because when the officers, like you became a young officer training for the artillery, well, the engineers get the same young officers course, and they come and I worked at Townend Barracks, so we used to do course support. So we would help the officers when they were doing bridges. We had some great laughs with them. I won't go into the story now, but there was some great
pins going in the wrong way and all sorts. Yeah,
you can well imagine. But the fact is that when those guys came out the other end, they knew the stuff that they were expecting the lads and lasses to do, which is what it's all about. Because every time they put pen to paper or made an order, that they knew what they were sending the guys to.
Yeah. Again, empathy.
Yeah. So this is an important question for me, and I've had mixed reactions to this. What's the secret to your success?
The people around me. I'd love to sit here, Joe, and tell you that, you know, where I've got to now, you know, the ridiculous story of a transition away from my military life into this, you know, into the jobs that I've had and jobs I'm now going into, you know, the luck that sits there. You know, I would point to luck, but of course, like we said earlier, you make your own luck. And in this case, my luck is entirely down to the people around me who have helped me, set me up for success, guided me, mentored me, coached me, you know, pushed me sometimes, you know, supported. I can't genuinely look you in the eye and tell you that the success is all mine. It's of good people around me who have been willing to go and help out. I remember a lesson I learned in the Career Transition Partnership. One of the sort of the chaps who came and talked to us, who was very much a business guy, and he came up with this story called the Favour Bank. The ability to pass on a favour that's done to you, to both enjoy someone giving you a help up, but then also paying that forward, doing the same thing for. It's all about paying that support network. The same thing for other people. Take a minute to pick up the support. Someone who pings up on LinkedIn and says, "Listen, just give us a quick hand here."
Tom's just went a bit pear-shaped there. So you were saying that the favour bank was, just repeat over.
Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, the concept of the favour bank, the ability to pay forwards, a favour done to you to pay it forward to someone else. Every time someone gives you a help out, a chuck up, points you in the direction of a job or a course, or gives you a piece of advice, pay that forwards. Again, one of the reasons I'm here now talking to you, and some of the great work that you do in helping people transition is part of that favour bank. We all contribute to it, we all make deposits into it, and we all withdraw from it at times. The key thing is to keep it topped up and make sure that every new generation of service leavers, of men and women from the services, look after each other by paying into that favour bank, by looking after each other on LinkedIn, by doing things like this, giving advice and guidance, offering coaching and mentoring, where requested and where required to the people. All of my success is down to the network and the willingness of people to go and do me a favour and give me a leg up. And again, the reason I'm here talking to you now is because I owe that network of people, that favour bank, a massive debt, and I will keep repaying and putting money back into it, keep making deposits as long as I live, because I owe it hugely for where I am today.
Thank you for that, and that's a brilliant attitude. And it's interesting, sometimes when we get out the military, and we all go through it, that when the wrought iron gate metaphorically closes behind us, that only means that another gate's opening. Because I did some research because of the charity Transformation for Veterans that I'm connected with. The amount of people that are either ex-military or directly affected by those who are ex-military or know someone in the military closely was, last time I looked, about over 22 million people in the UK. So just because you get out doesn't mean to say you're on your own. And I love the way now that the skills are being, which you mentioned before, translated into civvy speak. Because on LinkedIn I see it more and more, which is really great. And I when I see people looking to open to network, I've just liked and shared one this morning, because it means that they want to share their experience, which I think is fabulous. You mentioned the importance of having a good coach mentor. I think you've really done a great service. How valuable do you think the skills are and transferable into Civvy Street that you learn in the military? I think you've touched on it, but now I want you to identify it specifically.
Yeah, so we will never know just how marketable we are to the civilian world until we actually enter into it and start doing it. And I say marketable because you can't easily put a dollar value on resilience, on robustness as a character, on mission focus, on self-discipline, on a sort of attitude of get the work done till it's done. There are cautionary tales with all these things as well. We need to be aware every good thing has a bad thing attached to it as well. So watch out for exploitation. Watch out for people who, or organisations perhaps, who will hoover up ex-military types because of a work ethos that they wish to exploit. And again, the answer to that, the cure to that, is the network. Once again, asking questions, finding which companies are good, which companies treat their ex-services types well, and those who people leave and feel exploited. Because we are very loyal, and loyalty is a hugely valued characteristic for business, but it can be exploited for those organisations that don't share the same values and don't value people in the way that they should. For anyone who's been in leadership positions, characteristics like empathy, as you said earlier, the ability to walk a day in someone else's shoes, to translate in a mission-focused way an idea, a plan, a strategy, a scheme of maneuver into an executable way of doing something to achieve an aim, to achieve a goal. I find myself using, for various reasons, effects-based warfare. Something that friends of mine, anyone who's been a joint fire air controller, anyone who's done any kind of grand fire, translate all every officer's job, launching large amounts of high explosive into the battle space. How do you turn that into a civilianized task. How does that translate into the civilian
Yeah.
world? Because the civilian world doesn't do that, and I'm very grateful that it doesn't. Risk management. What the industry that I'm now involved in, risk. Believe it or not, it's quite risky to sling large amounts of high explosive into the battle space, particularly whizzing past your head, and using words like danger close. They are all risk management terms. So again, use the network. Ask people who've made those transitions. How do I translate the skills, experiences, the background that I've got? How do I translate that into a civilianized term? And those people who've made that transition should always be happy to help you make those links between, right, so you've done this over here. Well, actually, that can be, you can call that this project. I want to build a bridge. Project management. I organised a junior NCO bar evening, right? Oktoberfest for junior NCOs meeting. Planning, execution. Organisation, project management. Again, you can translate these things that you've done into skills that you've learned. And quite often we don't even realise it. We don't even know that, and because HR these days is focusing more on skills, it's a golden opportunity for us to say we can translate how our experiences result in skills.
Yeah, and I quite often, it brings it home to me with my sons as they grow older. My eldest is 26, then 20, 21, and 18, and when they're confronted with a task, I say, "Oh, you just do this, this, and this," and they go, "Oh," as it, and you think, "Oh, right, okay, maybe it wasn't, maybe it's not as easy as I think it is," and I'm sure you do the same because you're right. When it's flash bang, and things are going off around you, you don't get that in Civvy Street. But the fact is that you can so easily utilize those skills in civilian, non-threatening ways, or things that are happening that aren't threatening to civilians other than profit margins, but use it in the same sort of way, if that makes sense.
It's a really good point you make as well, Joe, that one of the things we're not used to doing, and a blind spot that servicemen and women will have when they leave, is working for an organization whose mission statement is about making money. That was a shock to me. That was a surprise, and it's a mindset shift between an organization that's built on success of the mission, a success of an objective that quite often is non-commercial in nature, to working for an organization that does have a commercial angle to it, that is ultimately there to make money for shareholders, stakeholders, for anyone who's investing in the company. That the objective here is to make money and make more. That is a massive blind spot for us because it's not something we're necessarily familiar with when we leave. And it's something to get used to. It's not a bad thing. It is ultimately a mission statement. It's a profit margins are a measure of success. We measure our success in the military by other metrics, but it is but a metric for success. So don't worry about the idea of a commercial organization making money. There's nothing dirty about it. There's nothing unusual about it. It is simply a different form of success metric. And see it in that light. It doesn't become quite so unfamiliar and quite so strange.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. A great tip. Finally, it's been an absolutely brilliant roller coaster of an interview. We've covered so much, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and wisdom. Last question, which is sort of the Columbo question, like just one more thing. What's the one thing, the biggest tip you could get to someone who's still in the military and thinking about leaving, or has left the military and maybe things aren't going as well as they wanted to? What's the biggest tip you could give them to help them achieve their success?
Take a second to write down everything you've done. Journal is a common phrase they use in the civilian world now, keeping a journal. Take a minute to take stock of what you've done and what you've achieved, particularly when things aren't going well. It's very easy to get into what we would call the 24-hour battle mode, crisis mode, dealing with things in a very kind of short-term way, not be able to see beyond the end of your nose. Thinking in very small terms. Again, the military teach this well, but it's still a discipline to do and get right. Is to take a condor moment, to step back, take that 3,000-foot view. For those who are thinking about leaving, do it in a very clear-eyed way. Don't, for God's sake, leave the military because your current job is a bit crap, or it's not what you wanted, or your boss is giving you a hard time. Those are short-term reasons to leave. Take a minute to look at the industry and say, listen, I'm going to move jobs in 2 years. I'm going to transition, or the boss is going to be gone in a couple of years' time. At worst, one of the nice things about the military, and the good things and bad things, is that officers move around, people shift jobs. There's loads of opportunities to shift around the place. So, yeah, don't leave in a reactionary way. Never leave the military, or think about leaving the military as a reaction to something else, because that's taking something away from you that's out of your control. That said, always look at the opportunities that are out there in the big wide world and ask yourself the question: do I want a different challenge? No matter what, by the time, let's assume that everyone does a relatively short 4-year career in the military, what you will have learned in those 4 years will set you up for success for a lifetime. And the transition to civilian life it feels scary at the time, but it's also the best thing you'll ever do. And I think it's also always worth reminding ourselves that is the real world. This is the real world. The civilian world. I am now a civilian. Okay, this is the real life. This is what we are there to defend, to serve, to look after, to maintain, to ensure prosperity and growth for. We serve in the military to enjoy the fruits of this world here. So in some ways, I think we should always aspire to becoming more normal by joining the civilian world, but albeit with those amazing experiences and backgrounds that we've picked up in our military service.
Yeah, exactly. That's brilliant. And just to also add to that, something that also came to mind is, even when things are going wrong, not to plan, and you have difficulty remembering all those things, the fact that you wake up, your heart's pumping, your lungs helping you breathe, the body is an amazing thing, and the mind is even more amazing. So it's about just reflecting on all those things that you've just mentioned there, Mark.
Yeah, taking a minute, take that condor moment to step away from the immediate and look at it in a bigger picture if you can. Again, it's a discipline. It's one that we get used to. The military is very good at this one, but that condor moment is absolute gold dust to get a bit more perspective. Take a different view. Move around the flank. Take a 90-degree angle on it. Look at the problem again in a different. To do that, ask someone else to give you a hand on it. Ask their opinion. Again, use the network. All these perspectives, this diverse set of experiences we've got from different regions, sappers, gunners, we routinely bang heads with each other, but actually we're more similar than we'd like to admit in a routine way. But we all have different experiences to share. And if you want, that condor moment can be helped by someone just providing you a different angle and a different view on the same problem. Yeah.
Well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Joe. It's been good to speak to you.
Okay, bye.
.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoelTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit JoelTeams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's JoelTeams.com, JoelTeams, JoelTeams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.